Welcome back, everybody, to Engineers Booth. My name is DJ Ed. This is going to be a good one. Lots of great information sitting on the stage with me. MillionDollarSnare. Listen, mastering is one of the most underrated things that I probably could ever talk about in the music business when it comes to records. We got Nicolas, Demitrius next to me. You want to do a formal introduction to yourselves? Just a brief bio for people, not a bio, a brief intro for people who don't know.
Yeah, my name is Nicolas De Porcel, owner, founder, MillionDollarSnare Mastering. We are known for work such as the Diamond record Roddy Ricch, The Box, as well as multiple other award-winning records, Baby Keem and Kendrick, Family Ties, Muni Long, Hours and Hours, and just a lot of other stuff.
My name is Demitrius Lewis II. I'm his assistant and also a mastering engineer at MillionDollarSnare.
All right. Thank you for that. That was a small flex. Small, tiny flex, though. Yeah.
It's not a flex, it's just facts.
It's just facts. Okay. Before we get into any other conversation, people always couple mixing and mastering, right? So I want to just, from the professionals, I guess whoever wants to go first, what is mastering?
So mastering is basically taking the stereo mix and then balancing the sonic characteristics to make it sound the best it possibly can and be able to translate across all streaming platforms and all devices, phone, cars, your own speakers, and just make the project sound the best it possibly can.
Atmos mixes as well. We can master those.
So what's the, I guess from your perspective, what is the difference between mixing and mastering?
So mixing is taking all of the individual elements like the vocals, the stems of the beat, and actually kind of molding all of that into one stereo mix and making it sound cohesive and sound like an actual song, where mastering is taking that mix and enhancing it in a way.
Yeah, so in mixing you have a lot more control of each element of the track, right? So like if I want to bring up a kick or turn up ad-libs or add reverb to something, I could do that in mixing. Mastering, we are, like Demetrius said, focused on maximizing that mix, and we take a sort of a step back where we're listening as almost like the very first member of the audience, whoever gets to hear that record, right? So we're hearing things like S's that are like too crazy, or pops or crackles, and we're also like able to notice where things can be maximized. So like we want that kick and 808 hitting as hard as it can when it hits your speakers. When we get the mix, sometimes, like it'll be there, but we have to like really push it to take it as far as it can go. And I mean, like with how competitive recording and the industry is right now, like you have, as an artist, you have to be able to compete. You have to have your record maximized, right? You want to present that mix in the very best light possible in order to get just the basic promo, playlist, anything like that. If you want to be even scrolling on TikTok, like if you hear a song, it's quiet, and the next song comes on, and it's like, whoa, that's way louder, like what is that? Like people notice. They might not, it might be subconscious, but they notice, right?
Something that I always notice when I talk to people is they confuse mastering with loudness, right? And I don't know if that's an annoyance in your profession, but can you explain the difference if there is one? A lot of people take compressors and like, oh yeah, it's mastered, and they just compress the hell out of it. That's something I've done. That's what a lot of people do. I know that's not your process, but can you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah. So actually, when training Demetrius, so Demetrius has been with me for a few years, and he would come in and he would try to master, and I would take like an L2, like, Fab Filter L2, and I'd bring it down like 11 dB or whatever, and I'd be like, what sounds better? And he would like listen to both, and he'd be like, man, your L2, sounds better. And I was like, all right, so if someone's giving us a file with their L2 on it, right, like we have to be able to like beat whatever they're giving us, right? That's what mastering is. So we're not like 100% focused on loudness. Like there are things like in mixes that I get that when we like start getting loud, can get kind of annoying, like crackles, distortion. Like like phasey, like echo things that just come out, and you're like, oh, that's not great. So we'll go into those little, it's milliseconds where this problem is happening. We'll work on those milliseconds of audio, and so the listener, like, they don't really care about that little 10 millisecond splice of audio that we fixed, right? But as they're listening to the song and they're playing it from 0 to minute 3, second 4, they didn't notice the 100 things that we did in between, right? And that's kind of what mastering is. Like, we're going along, making sure every moment of the record is the best possible moment. Like, we're not, it's not throw a limiter on it, get it loud. Like,
yeah, that's what people think it is.
Yeah, we're going for maximum emotion. And I think, like, as an engineer, that's what people have seen with MillionDollarSnare that separates us from other engineers. They get it back and they're like, whoa, I don't know how you did that, but you did it.
The process for a mixing engineer and a mastering engineer, I would imagine, is different, right? Because I've seen people, and I don't know, I'm just talking from an ignorant place, but I've seen people master a 2-track, right? But then I've also seen people master with the session. So what's the actual way that MillionDollarSnare handles it?
We do stem mastering, but we prefer to get whatever bounced mix you have. And like what you were talking about earlier, like mixing and mastering being separate. Well, they are in a sense, but they're super intertwined. And so as a mastering engineer, I prefer to create relationships with the mixers so that when they send me that, stereo wave or whatever, I can be like, hey, maybe the vocal needs to come up a little bit. And therefore, like, I don't need the stems. Like, I rely on like that. When I listen in my studio, I know when something's right. It's my home base. It's actually, people don't know, but it's the home base for a lot of mixing engineers as well. Because when I hear it, when I put that first ear on it, I'm like, okay, that kick is like way too loud and too boomy. Message the mixer and they're like, okay, yeah, maybe I can hear that. And they'll send me a new version. And that goes a lot further than any processing I could do with my gear, with my computer. Me getting on the phone and calling up Ali and be like, hey, did you hear that? Like, were the S's kind of too harsh in your studio? And Ali's like, oh, I'll check it out. And he goes and plays it in the car. It makes the end result way better than if I were like, oh, let me not say anything and try to just do as much as I can on my computer.
I want to go back a little bit because, I mean, you named just a small fraction of your catalog and the works that you've done. But I want to go back as far as making a decision to be a mastering engineer. I didn't even know before Ali started. I mean, I've been with Ali 15, 20 years. And he's always been hell-bent on creating a lane for engineers because it's underserved community, right? But recording engineer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, what made you want to go into that, being like a mastering engineer? Did you start in mixing? Did you start in recording? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so this story is like pretty well known at this point, but when I was 12 years old, I started like making beats, and it was basically because all my friends were like starting to rap. And I was like, where do I fit into this? I don't see myself rapping, you know what I'm saying? So I started making beats, and that love of production led to, like, I went through the entire, basically the entire process, the entire production process, from producing to recording to mixing and then to finally mastering. So later on, when I was in my 20s, all my friends started, those same friends that were rapping earlier, they were like, oh, we're mixing now. And I was like, oh shit, where do I fit into the mixing? Where do I can't mix if you guys are all mixing. And so then I started mastering. There was a lot of things that happened for me to start mastering, including I was producing, I was working on my own album, just like an EDM thing. And I would pay my whole paycheck to these big engineers. So I'd spend all my money like trying to get these masters back, and I would get it back, and like they would dull my top end, or like something would be weird about like my song didn't sound how it sounded before I sent it out. And so I got to a point where like my friends were mixing, and the masters I was getting back weren't great. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to start buying up gear. And so I started buying up gear and trying to figure it out. I was reading books. I was YouTubing. I was looking at, it was on YouTube back when like Luca Predalesi, I don't know if I ever say his name right, even though I've known who he is for a long time. I used to watch all his stuff. And I would just like soak up information. And I wouldn't do what everyone was doing, but I would take like one or two books off the shelf, and put everything back. Like, oh, that's a cool technique. Let me try that out. And so for me, mastering and especially trying to stay on the cutting edge is understanding what kind of people did in the past, but applying a new theory to it or a new set of principles. And that's kind of where we're at today.
Did you take the formal training route, or was it more like learning on the job?
No, I've been teaching myself music since I was 12. I was always going to teach myself music. The thing I was bad at was business, so I went to school for business.
Oh,
and
okay.
I learned how to do math, which is very, very underrated.
Math is underrated.
Yeah, it helps a lot when you're trying to figure out how to be an engineer for a living.
Now, Demetrius, I want to talk to you about mentorship. Being able to work under Nicolas, like I could imagine, it's crazy, but how do you put your ego aside, right? And or when do you know when to apply your ego? Like when do you push back against the mentor?
I haven't gotten to that point yet, honestly.
So if he tells you to do something and you disagree, you don't say anything, or how do you handle that situation?
I think it's just like, you got to try it out. Because if I don't try it out, then how am I going to know whether it worked or not? And he has more experience. I mean, he has like 10 years on me. I'm like young. I just graduated college, so I can't really say, oh, I wouldn't do that. But I might think, oh, that's kind of weird. And then I try it out. Oh, I don't like it on this master, but I might try it on this master. Or most of the time, I'm like, oh, yeah, that was the right move.
And then for you, did you always want to be a mastering engineer, or were you a rapper before? Like,
funny thing is, I used to like sing and rap, but then like my friends wanted to be in the SoundCloud era. So like when I was in high school, SoundCloud was real popular. Everybody was recording on YouTube beats, type beat, Drake type beat, Lil Wayne type beat. But all their stuff sounded like trash, and I was like, oh, let me mix your stuff. And then they're like, oh, well, we're kind of mixing already, but they just have like a reverb and there's nothing on there. And I'm like, yeah, that's not mixing. And I just went on YouTube and went to town, started reading a bunch of books, looking up stuff, going on Gearspace, now it's called, just reading forums and learning new stuff.
And you both talked about books. That's important. Like, I'm a bookhead. I do audiobooks, but being an engineer, I can imagine like visual is important, and also soaking that information in. A couple of book recommendations for anybody that's interested in learning the things that you learned.
Yeah, I mean, the go-to for mastering is Mastering Audio by Bob Katz. And then we have like a whole little library in the studio now. I can't remember all the authors, but get the Bob Katz one. That's like the textbook. That's like mastering textbook. Once you know all the rules, then start breaking them.
Say it again. What's the name of the book?
Mastering Audio by Bob Katz.
Mastering Audio. But did you have one?
That's the same one I read. I mean, the funniest thing is when I met him, I had the first edition, and I was like, all this stuff is crazy, but it was a bunch of stuff from like the early 2000s before streaming, and he said, yeah, throw that away and buy the newest edition and just read that.
I'm glad you brought up streaming, because that's something I want to talk to all the engineers today about. Is you were obviously been doing your thing. Has streaming changed the way that that mastering is done? From, because now you have spatial audio, you have Dolby, you have different things that didn't exist when there was a physical CD, right? So has it changed in the way that you do your job?
I mean, yes, because what we're focused on. So I think before streaming, you just had to worry about like how your masters were going to translate when someone put them like on their speaker system, right? So like, does it sound the same in the car as it sounds in my earbuds, as it sounds in the studio, on the whatever I'm playing it back from? But today we're actually mastering to optimize. We're optimizing our masters for transcoding. So we're anticipating how Spotify is going to transcode from Wave to Ogg Vorbis, how Apple is going to transcode from wave to ALAC and so on and so forth, because all these different streaming platforms take our audio file and they make it different in some form.
They compress the hell out of it.
Some do, yeah, and some do it better than others. But what we're trying to deliver is something optimal, so that when you play it back on Tidal all the way to Spotify, it sounds the same, without distortion, without artifacts, that type of stuff. And there are different tools today. We also do have requests for CD, and I know it happens when you want to sell. Yeah, I know there's fans out there, they want to buy CDs, like they want to buy stuff that's signed, they want to buy, vinyls, and so we'll get requests to send stuff to like lacquer cutters and that kind of stuff. And then we have to like go do the old school thing where we're like creating these PQ sheets, which basically tell the person who's cutting the records the start and end times of the songs. But I mean, with anything, there's just an additional layer of attention that we need to pay in order to maximize those sonics.
I wanted to get into like best practices, because when someone says they're going to go to mastering, I have a feeling that a lot of people don't know what that looks like from a files perspective, right? So best practices for a client that wants to go to mastering with their music. How would you like? How do you prefer to have the information like sent to you? Do you prefer it to be? I know you brought up you wanted just a regular bounce to wave. Do you have a specific like ratio? Do you have a specific like export? Do you prefer anything?
The more I get asked this question, the more my answer changes. I think I want to know like what the goal, like what the end goal is. Like, are we mastering a single? Are we doing an album? Is this going to turn into like a 10-year long relationship where we're going to be like working with each other? And depending on where we're fielding the mixes from, like, so if we get booked on our website, we have there's less communication, right? Because like you upload a file, you pay, and then we'll send you the file back. The one thing that is different that we do that's been different than the experience I had sending my music to mastering was sometimes I'll get files booked on the website and I'll email the person and be like, hey, this doesn't sound right. Like, are you sure you want me to master this file? And I'll tell them like what's wrong. And that saves a lot of both of our time and I think a lot of money for people. Because I used to just pay money. I'd send it into a black box, I'd get a file back, I'd have no communication with the engineer, and I'd be like, all right, well, this is what I get, you know? So that's one thing. The other thing is, when I first started working with a mixer, Mark Keitel, we worked on this last Reason single together.
Shout out to Keitel.
He's out here somewhere. We found a sweet spot. He sent me a version that was limited, and I was like, okay, no, this sounds great. Like, I could master this. And then he asked me, like, hey, should I send one unlimited? And I was hesitant because I'm like, oh, well, I'm thinking in my head, like, well, I already did the master, so, like, it's going to create more work for me. And I was like, all right, well, let me just see. Like, I pulled in this non-limited one, and as I was comparing both end masters, I was like, man, this kick is hitting way harder now in this new file. Like, everything sounds punchier and louder and bigger, and I think we've like dialed in our sweet spot together. So my relationships with the mixing engineer, like, I want to be able to dial that in with you personally, like, if that makes sense. Sometimes artists too. Like,
yeah, create a relationship and build from there.
Yeah, sometimes people need stem mastering, like, you have to send me the instrumental and acapella. I don't think you can get it right. And sometimes it's like, they're not engineers sending us this. It's like an artist in a bedroom who wants to like put something out. Seriously, like they might not be able to get it there. So we'll offer a service to like help upgrade their sound to make sure that it sounds like competitive with what's out.
Do you take it offensively when someone has notes for your master?
The first thought is always, yeah, like, but that's the ego. When I think back to my experience with mastering, how could I, right? Like, that was why I got into it. Like, I got into it because I didn't think someone else was getting my music right. So who am I to tell a producer, like, hey, no, this is right, when they're the one who played the piano, they played the drums, they sang, they recorded on it. That's not my job. My job is to help them take it to where they want it to be.
This is a hot topic. We're going to cover it all day, but AI, right? There's all these software being developed it mixes itself. It can master itself. What's your thoughts on AI? Do you embrace technology? Do you not trust it? Like, what's your thoughts on it? Oh, go ahead.
I don't really have a problem with AI. I mean, we use it for video editing, thanks to Ryan. I mean, it really does help. I think that for some people, like things like Lander and other things, I mean, if that's what they need or they feel like that's what's going to help their song be the best it can be, I mean, then that's their avenue. But I feel like we just have to embrace that we as mastering engineers are going to live in a time with AI. And it's our job to beat AI. We have to be better. We have to make sure that every time we step at the desk that we're being a better version of ourselves every single day.
One of the things that I love about EngineEars is that we have a platform like this to really convey our knowledge. And I don't feel like that's been done before. And I feel like a lot of the engineering and production knowledge has been closely held with a certain few individuals in the recording community, and thus stunted the technological advancement of music. So with AI, I believe that it's just another tool. And the AI is developed by a human, and so depending on who is programming that AI, that's the output you're gonna get. So once I start to be able to like input these different variables of whatever output I want, I'm gonna really start to train something cool that may make my job way more efficient. And with that technological advancement, I can build off that. I should be embracing new technology.
I love
especially that. like this is $1,000,000Snare. We embrace new technology. We are not doing anything like they did in the past, and that's how we love.
It's so important that and I love what you said, Demetrius, about it's your responsibility, because that's the approach, that's the ideology that you have to have moving forward. Because I know a lot of my OGs coming up, when we all got, can you get the monitor down a little bit? When we all got FL Studio, they were looking like, that's not real producing. This shit is stupid. You know what I mean? But I'm like, but your drums don't sound like this though. You know what I mean? So it was just like, the embracement of technology is super important on every level of music, right? Recording, mixing, mastering, on every level. Speaking of what you brought up, EngineEars, shout out to Ali for building this platform, and Dan and the whole team. But and I know you're on the platform. Are you familiar with it? How is a platform like EngineEars gonna change the workflow? Not necessarily for $1,000,000Snare, but for other mastering engineers that are coming after you. Like, oh, we have to hunt down our checks. It's kind of streamlining the industry, because I don't think you dealt with that before, I'm sure, but because you do everything now through your website, platforms like EngineEars are gonna make it a lot easier. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so this is Ryan. He is our studio operations manager, and he is the one who hunts down the checks. So if Ryan were freed up from hunting down checks, we would have a lot more bandwidth to grow our brand. And because Ryan has to spend so much time just dealing with bullshit, it's bullshit. It's other people hiring us and not wanting to pay. We're kind of stunted in what we can do as a business and as like freelance artists that EngineEars kind of solves for us. So the thing that I'm really excited for, and as more people continue to adapt in EngineEars, major labels booking through EngineEars will be a game changer.
Super game changer.
It's going to free us up so that we can do the art that we love to do within our business, to reach more people, to get to more touching of buttons. Like, the more I have to hunt down people and call them, the less I can actually sit in front of my desk, touch buttons, and make music. And that's I think what EngineEars solves for us.
I 100% agree. I want to get some questions, but just me personally, I want to, because up here we got Roddy Ricch, we got YG, we got Trippie Redd, we got all these different records, PG Lang. Can you talk about that? Because a lot of us went on a Kendrick drought. Like, we didn't have any Kendrick for a long time. You get the call or the files and you get Family Ties, right? Is that, like, when you get that, is that something that you look at like the rest of us from a fan's perspective? Is it all business? Is it all hands on deck? How do you handle a record like that?
I mean, as soon as you hear Kendrick come on, it's like the most secret shit on the planet. Like that's how it feels. You're like, oh fuck. They don't tell you when they send it to you. You just play it and you're like, even me, I'm sitting in the studio, I'm like, oh fuck. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, this has gotta slap, you know? So obviously very exciting, and like I'm really excited for Keem. Like, Keem's been going crazy, and I like, you know, maybe we're not meant to do, you know, these more established artists catalog, but when someone comes along like Keem, who's the new wave, who's the new school, like, I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited for the artists that I've never heard of coming into my studio, and I hear it and I'm like, what the fuck is that, you know? And that's happened over and over. That happened last year with Muni Long. Like, I don't know if Prizzy's here, might be here somewhere. Sends me a project, independent artist. I'm like, what is this? And then it wins a Grammy. It was independent. She was independent.
Shout out to Muni. That's crazy. And then a song, and then the duality of that, right? A new artist coming into the studio, and then the duality of a song that goes diamond with Roddy Ricch, right? Is it when you see that song ascend to where it is, and then you remember being in the studio receiving the files or sending it back out or whatever, do you ever have a recall, like a recap? Because has anybody else here mastered a diamond record? Exactly. So
we gotta let them raise their hand.
I'm just saying, I don't know what that feels like. I want to know what that's like, seeing that a song that you got the files for, and then it breaks every record for 6 months. It's on Billboard. Like, do you have a share in the emotion of that, or is it just like, oh yeah, that's dope, and then you like on to the next mix, or?
That's a difficult question, because if I take on the success of every record that I work on, I also have to take on the failure, almost, in a sense. So what I try to do is do my best work, and sometimes I'll sit back and I'll be like, damn, this sure beats working at Target, you know? Like, and that was my truth, you know? That was what I was doing before I quit my job. I was corporate at Target, and I was like, I was doing cool shit, but it wasn't what I loved to do. You know what I'm saying? So sitting back and reflecting and being like, these are cool accomplishments, that's great. How can I help the next person? How can I be of service? I'm not here to serve me. Like, yeah, I need to like feed my wife and my kids and, you know, the people who work at MillionDollarSnare. But like, when at the end of the day, like, what I'm here to do is serve other people. So,
I love that. I had a question for me as far as like, how does somebody start? Like, if somebody was, I guess Demitrius, you'd probably be better, but if somebody's here, are they mixing engineers? Mixing engineers? Okay, so if I wanted to start from scratch and I wanted to make that pivot like you did, and I wanted to up my game, how do I go from being a mixing engineer to a mastering engineer?
I would say study a lot, read. I watched a lot of interviews on the best master engineers, also listening to your favorite songs, your favorite masters, and then taking the mixes you work on. Most of your first masters will be a mix you did yourself. So you'll listen to your own mix and say, how can I make this better? And that's kind of a hard thing, because you spent hours listening to this record and you're like, oh, I think it's already hard, but it's not. It's not. Like, you got to really think of like, now I want to go back to the mix. Oh, now I got to master. But then once you get someone send it to you and you have to make their record better, that's the true test, where like you're like starting to do things for free. Let me see how I can actually enhance this. Is this beating, like Dep said, the L2? That's something I never knew about. How can I beat just a regular limiter on this mix, and then trying to make that like take pride in making things better and becoming better, reading forums. Oh, this EQ move, oh, I use parallel compression to bring this up. Most of those things you learn in mixing, but in mastering, you just have really a lot of books with rules. And sometimes you have to just really read those rules and learn how to break them. Like
fundamentals.
Yeah.
And then also last thing is DAWs, right? Is there a specific, because I've seen videos, I know. I've seen videos where people have mastered in FL Studio, been mastered, right? And I've seen videos of people on the internet who mix and master in Logic. I've never seen it in Reason, and I've seen it also in Ableton. Can you speak to your DAW choice, and then also, is it a myth that you can mix and master in other DAWs, or?
Yeah, no, you can do whatever you want in any DAW you want. I just don't think that I would be able to do it at the level that I'm able to do it at without Magic Sequoia. So we were just at Magic's at the booth. It's over there with Magic's and Intel and Razer, and we're doing demos of Magic Sequoia, which in my opinion, and it's not really even an opinion. This is like objective information, is the best DAW for mastering. I couldn't master 15 records a day, without this DAW, because of the level of control that I have. So I've done mastering and everything else, but after using Sequoia, I don't even know if you can call that mastering. So
there it is. There. Hope you wrote that down. Nicholas, Demetrius, thank you. The next panel is going to be my boy David Young and Kim, Hit Boy and all that. So we're right back here about 10 minutes or so. Thank you. EngineEars.com.